Welcome to Bad Dog Agility, a podcast helping you reach all of your dog agility goals. Whether it's competing under the bright lights of the televised finals at Westminster or successfully navigating a homemade course in your own backyard, we'll bring you training tips, interviews, and news about the great sport of dog agility. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
The show starts with your hosts, Jennifer, Esteban, and Sarah.
I'm Jennifer.
I'm Esteban.
And I'm Sarah, and this is episode 338. Today's podcast is brought to you by St. Rocco's Treats.
It's Grace from Hounds of Hack. It's Amber from American Canine Country.
It's Cynthia from CH Dog Agility.
It's Lindsay from Y2 Canines. And we love using St. Rocco's Treats as our high
value reward.
And you will too. Visit us at stroccostreats.shop and use the code BD30 for 30% off your first order. Enjoy the attention-grabbing flavor and easy-to-break texture that Grace, Amber, Cynthia, Lindsay, and so many others love about St. Rocco's Treats. Again, use the code BD30 for 30% off. Thank you.
And you can find a link to St. Rocco's Treats on the show notes page. Today, we're talking about the 2024 AKC National Agility Championship. Both myself and Jennifer were at the event. I was there running the before and after. Jen was there running lots of dogs. And Esteban was at home taking care of our family.
That's right.
So welcome to the podcast, everybody. And we are all back now at our respective homes, right, Jen?
Yes, it was a long drive home, but we made it home by Monday afternoon.
Excellent. So we wanted to just do a little wrap-up podcast here, talk about the event, how it went, our thoughts on everything having to do with nationals, and of course, letting you know who the winners are. But before we jump all the way in, let's talk about how our team did. And Jennifer, we'll start with you, the superstar. How was your nationals weekend?
So this year's nationals, I had 5 dogs running. I ran Lucky in preferred, and then Rio in 12 inches, B in 16, and 2 20-inch dogs. And I was very pleased with my performance. I would say that it's a lot of people would ask, okay, how are things going? I'm like, it's not my best work weekend, and it's not my worst weekend. A couple of years ago, I took and ran 7 dogs to nationals, and all of them made either challengers or finals. This year I took 5, which was less, so should have been easier, and ended up with 1 in challengers and 1 in finals. So from a percentage standpoint, I feel like it was a step down in my performance and my results, but it was kind of some weird, odd, fluky little things. It wasn't disastrous performances from my dogs or myself. I would say the nemesis of the weekend seemed to be the weave pulls. I had 4 weave pull faults over the course of all of the dogs and all of the runs, which was a little bit odd, not something that I was prepared for. But the 2 highlights for my weekend is that B did make it into finals the easy way, going 3 for 3. So she had 3 clear rounds and a placement in the standard round. And then in finals, finished 3rd place. And I was really pleased with that. My goal once we made finals was to try to see if we can get a top 4 position. I knew that was going to be tough and we were going to have a great run. We went into finals seeded 2nd. And the dog who was seeded ahead of us stayed ahead of us. And then we got beat out by the winner of the challengers round. So we ended up 3rd. But we get to be in the photo. And then High Five made the challengers round, which is not a place I want to be, but it means that she was fast enough to have a placement in a round. So that's kind of exciting out of, over 300 20-inch dogs. For her to have a 5th place finish in jumpers tells me the potential and the capability that's there in terms of her speed and athleticism. So those were my highlights of my weekend. All of the dogs had at least a couple clean runs, if not more. So again, not a horrible weekend, not my best, but really, really happy with our last 2 runs on Sunday, our challengers round and our finals round.
And for those of you who don't know, at AKC Nationals, there's basically a kind of like a warm-up practice day. They have some runs, and then the main actual competition has 3 preliminary rounds, right? A jumper's course, a jumping course, a standard course, and a hybrid course, which is a mix of the 2, minus the dog walk. So there will be an A-frame and a teeter in the hybrid round, and they take the top dogs cumulatively through those 3 rounds. And those are the dogs that make the finals, both preferred and regular height classes. And when Jennifer's talking about the challenger round, that's a special round. It's almost like a second chance round, right? So high placing dogs in each of the 3 preliminary rounds, essentially the top 4, who have not already qualified for finals. So Jennifer casually mentioned the easiest, best way to get in the finals is to have 3 clean, fast runs, right? But there's another way to sneak into the finals, and every finals class has one dog. It's the challenger round winner.
And it's winner take all.
And it's winner take all. So you have the challenge round. Ideally, you're taking like the top 4 from round 1, and then round 2, and then round 3. So you could have 12 dogs, and they all vie on a very difficult challengers course to see who wins that one spot and can get into the finals. And so it turns out that that's been a wildly successful, in my opinion, program. I remember in the early years when challengers dogs would win, people would be annoyed. Right? Can you imagine?
When they would win finals.
When they would win finals.
Right.
Because they're like, oh, this dog didn't do 3 clean runs, right? It was a little bit of a controversy.
Like a sneaky way.
Many, many years ago. But I think agility has evolved very far away from the perfectionist ideal of, say, obedience, right? As a standard for performance. And in this way, you are ensuring, one, an exciting, a very exciting, super exciting class of its own, on par with even the finals, and that is the challengers round. So people could watch that on the stream. But what will be televised later on ESPN after editing will be just the finals. But that challengers round dog, it virtually guarantees that dog is going to be very fast and capable of showing up in the finals and winning. And that's what Jen is saying here. The challenger round dog got in there and was able to beat B, even though B is obviously amazingly fast.
Right. You can have an upset of the top seed, essentially.
Right.
And so I do want to talk about a couple of more dogs and handlers that are, I guess, tangentially related to the Bad Dog Agility team. So we were there doing the before and after online course, and many of our listeners will have participated in that. But we basically follow Jen through all of her runs. And then we have a couple of guest handlers that contribute a couple of their runs where they give it like a voiceover analysis of how they thought it went and what they were thinking at the time. And so we were very excited to have our guest handlers also do very well. One of them was Cynthia Horner with Nimble, who was the defending champion from last year. She analyzed one of her preliminary rounds, and then she ended up in the challengers round. Where she, I believe, knocked a bar. Yeah, she had a knocked bar, so was not able to get out of the challengers round, but was able to compete in the challengers round. And we'll get to the courses in a minute. But by the way, that was a pretty awesome, exciting course that a lot of people really liked. So that was exciting for our people to get to kind of come along on that. And then we had Amber McCune with her 24-inch Border Collie Howie, and he went 3 clean and into the finals where he placed second in the finals. So we were very happy for her as well. And then the 16-inch winner, and we'll go through all the winners in a minute, but right now we're talking about people related to Bad Dog Agility, and that was Jada Sani with her Border Collie Zula. She's a junior handler, 17 years old, and she's a Bad Dog Agility sponsored athlete. So we are very, very, very excited for her for that win. An incredible accomplishment for somebody so new to the world and new to the sport. So very excited about all of that. All right, so let's move on and talk, I guess very briefly, let's talk about everything but the courses, Jen. So the location, the venue, the footing, what was your impression of this year's Nationals?
All in all, I was pretty happy with the site, with the surface, with the amenities of the Nationals this year. We did have Nationals at the Perry Fairgrounds several years ago, and it was a different layout this year. I actually liked the layout this year a little bit better. It's spread out in the sense that it is groupings of 2 rings together in 3 different areas. So you have 2 rings in one building, 2 rings in another building, and then 2 rings undercover. You have free crating in another area, stalls in another area. So it's kind of spread out, but it's all within close proximity. And I do feel like it was closer in proximity and less walking than what we had the last time it was at Perry, just based on memory. What I also like is there's a lot of availability for on-site RVing and camping. And there was a ton of people RVing, and the ability for everyone to have hookups and have what they need and stay on site was really nice. The surface, in my opinion, was top notch. I think as far as national events go, when you're talking about hundreds of competitors coming together in one location, this was the year I felt like there were the least amount of complaints. I'm not going to say no complaints. I'm not going to say that nobody was slipping. I'm not going to say that there wasn't some amount of deep surface for some of the dogs. But in general, I think it was some of the best surface that we've had. I did feel like it was pretty consistent across all 6 rings as well. That sometimes, you'll get like, oh, in this ring, it's one surface, and somewhere else it's deeper or slipperier. There was one evening where the 8-inch dogs were running well into 6:30 at night after that ring had been running all day. Did feel like it got a little bit beat up. In general, I like to see the small dogs, the 4 and 8-inch dogs, run before the large dogs, before it gets beat up. But I thought that they did a great job with the surface and the amenities. I would have no complaints if they said it was going to be back there again in future years. They did announce next year will be Tulsa. So if you didn't hear that, they did announce next year Tulsa. But if they went back to Perry, I would be okay with it. We did have some unfortunate weather with some rain that made things not easy. But there was a covered walkway to get from the stalls to rings 3, 4, 5, and 6. So theoretically, even in the rain, if you were in the stalls, you could kind of stay undercover going to at least 4 of the 6 rings, which was just kind of a nice little perk. So not many complaints on my end. I did stay on site. I think the big thing that people that I hear rumor of kind of complaints or gripes about Perry as a location is just the lack of like hotels and restaurants in close proximity. You have to travel a little bit further, but the show site itself, I was fine with. No complaints on.
Yeah, I felt like everybody I knew was in an RV. And so it makes for a little bit like you don't get the kind of like 20-person dinners, that sometimes you get at some of the others where you kind of get together with a whole bunch of people. But I think instead what you had was kind of like groups of RVers getting together and barbecuing and stuff like that. So that's fine. And the internet was horrible. The cell service. Like you couldn't even get text through. So it was really hard to stay connected with other people. So that was a little frustrating as somebody who was trying to run an online class in the middle of it. But other than that, I didn't really have any complaints with that. Let's talk about the courses, because I thought that there were some interesting things that we saw on these courses. And I guess I'll start with, I felt like standard was like a nice, reasonable course. They were all reasonable, but what I meant like is like what you would expect. And jumpers, but hybrid, I felt like that's where things really were a lot different from what I had anticipated. Do you kind of agree?
I would agree with that. Standard was standard, right? It was like exactly on point with what I thought. I looked at that course map and I was like, yep, these are the skills that we knew we were going to have. The overall challenge and flow is exactly what I thought we would have. And then jumpers, my initial thought was like, okay, well, this is a little easy. They're going nice. They're going kind on us. And then they were like, oh, wait, but here's hybrid. We're going to make up for jumpers being a little easy and throw you a tricky hybrid. I thought hybrid was quite tricky. And I think of hybrid in my mind is supposed to mimic kind of time to beat. Right? Like it's a mix of standard and jumpers with no dog walks. So it's kind of time to beat. And that course was definitely not time to beat like. So I was fine with it, but I definitely feel like it elevated the expectation of skills for future events. Like they basically made a statement and said like, look, we're raising the bar. We're elevating what our expectations and standards might be. Here's kind of what we're doing. And you better make sure you have some of these skills. I mean, it was in hybrid that you really, you had to have either a backside or a throttle right at number 3. I mean, you had to have that option. And then it just presented several other challenges going through that course. There was potentially what you'd perceive to be a relatively tricky weave pole entry. You had a second backside coming off of an A-frame. You had an A-frame tunnel discrimination, all these things all on one course. Teeter that needed to be fairly independent, all on one course. So 2 backsides. Lots of stuff to work. So yeah, I thought that was the one that really threw people for a loop.
I loved it. People were sending me maps and they were all sending me the hybrid map all at the same time. And I was impressed with the course design. I really liked it. As you mentioned, hybrid tends to be not that tough at AKC Nationals. And I think what keeps the Q rate down typically in past years has been the stress,
the nerves,
the pressure involved with that being the final run. So everyone that has 2 clean runs, they're really trying to get that 3rd clean run. If people have busted and they've got 1 clean and 1 faulted, then they're really going for it to maybe try and get a challenger round spot, or they're being very careful to protect a placement that they're sitting on from one of their cues. And so they need to be clean because you need 2 out of 3 clean runs to even go to the challenger round. So that's an additional rule that you have there. And so I thought it was a welcome change. And as you hinted at, like maybe this is a new direction that the AKC is going in. It is a welcome change to me because we do the NAC prep every year for people getting ready for that event. And basically I tell them the same thing. It's probably going to be jumpers that gets you. That is typically the most technical of the 3 preliminary rounds. But that was not the case this year. So I think that was pretty interesting. Jen, do you think that was just a quirk of that judge for that course, or was there a directive coming down somewhere along the lines? Now that we have special insider information, I'm just asking the question. What do you think?
It would be interesting to run the Q rate on that jumpers course compared to other years, because even though it seemed a little bit easier and more flowy on paper, I'm not actually sure that I felt like the Q rate was that much higher when all said and done. And that's just going off of impressions of going over and looking at the scoreboards. I also feel like the new the new schedule also changes things a bit. Because like you made the comment that a lot of times what gets people in hybrid is it's the 3rd run. But that's been in past years. Remember, with the new schedule, the hybrid is not the 3rd run for 50% of the people there. So it is the 2nd run for 50% of the people. The 3rd run is jumpers, and then vice versa. So like for me, hybrid was my 2nd run with B. And I even made the comment to somebody that I was glad that hybrid was my 2nd run and not my 3rd, because I knew the 3rd run would carry the most nerves. And I wanted the easier course when the nerves were high. And that worked out for me. I ran hybrid and I felt middle of the road. I was like, okay, I want a clean run, but it was only my 2nd run. I'd only come clean off standard. And it was technical and I was working it. And then when I really got nervous was going into round 3 and I had that nice flowing jumpers course. So with the new format, it's split as to whether people run jumpers or hybrid is round 3. So I don't think we can put nerves in play just on hybrid. And that's why I think maybe the jumpers course, even though the jumpers course maybe perception was that it was easier. For a lot of people, it was the 3rd round. So nerves did get them. I also feel like in jumpers, a lot of times that's just the class of bars. Watching the 20-inch class, it seemed like I saw so many brilliant runs with just a bar. And that tends to be, I feel like, very common for the large dogs and jumpers, even at local shows. It's like, oh, can they keep their feet up through all that? And can they run on the dirt? So I don't know that the Q rate was actually higher. I think the perception of the course was easier, but I think that was just coincidence. I don't think that was coming from anything other than the judge of that course, the designer of that course, kind of putting their flair on things. It had a really great flow. So I do think it was a nice flowing course. It was a good one. It was fast. It was a very fast course. People were in and out, and I liked it. I think it was a good balance to go with hybrid.
Right. Yeah. And it's really interesting what you mentioned about like half the class jumpers is their 3rd and half the class hybrid is their 3rd, because one of our VIPers had mentioned that to me, like a really analytical guy, and pointed out that like, how does that change things? Because if you don't have any contacts in your 3rd run, there's not very much that you can do to quote push, if you need that last run to like either sneak into the last spot, or you need a placement in the last run to try to get into challengers round, if your last run is jumpers, there's not very many ways that you can make a jumpers run.
Right. In the 2nd round,
if jumpers is going to be your 3rd, if you know that like that's where you're going to make up some time. Is maybe
some gamesmanship there. You know? I'm glad you mentioned that, Jen, because I was going to ask if the 20-inch class was so large again that they did the thing where half of them started jumpers, half of them started standard, and then they flip-flopped. Is what they've done I believe in past years, right?
That I can't remember. Did half of them start one and then the other, or did they all do it in the same order?
This year, it was sort of like a delayed start. So the order for jumpers and the order for hybrid was the same, but it was a delayed start. So the one ring started at 7:30 and then the next ring started at 9:30. So you kind of like run jumpers and then move over to hybrid and have like a kind of like a delayed start.
So when we say that half the event had hybrid second versus third, we're talking about full heights.
Yes.
Half the heights had it
like
second
like
or third.
high fives round 2 was jumpers, but B's round 2 being a 6-inch dog was hybrid.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So I have a question for you on course design, because one thing that I heard some negative feedback on was that we had multiple runs. In fact, I think you could probably say that all 3 of the runs with contacts had a pretty significant turn to the teeter. Was that anything that bothered you at all, or not really, or did you notice it? I mean, I would say like all 3 of the rounds, like standard, there was like a significant turn to the teeter after they came over like a broad and another jump. And challengers, there was like the off-course trap of the weaves, and the dogs were going wide. That I rather liked. I felt like that was like a very interesting.
Yeah, I want to weigh in after I hear what Ben says.
And then, I think it was like, I think people who run like very large strided dogs were like, the dogs are going to land and have to kind of cut back for the teeter. So I wondered if that bothered you at all, or if you're just like, that's part of agility, is controlling turns like that.
I mean, I guess my answer is that it never dawned on me. So it obviously didn't bother me. I'm like, well, as you said that, as you're saying this and you're talking, I'm tilting my head back and forth going, now, what were the courses? And I'm like, you're right. They all were kind of turns to the teeter. It never dawned on me that they were all similar in that regard. So I guess the answer would be no, it didn't bother me. It didn't affect. I don't know if that was a trend. I don't know. I mean, I guess you're right. It wasn't something that I thought a lot about until this moment. So,
all right, there you have it.
Yeah.
All right. You have strong thoughts, Esteban. Let's hear them.
I do. I think you should be able to turn your dog approximately 90 degrees. And I think if any of these were over a spread into the turn, you should probably give your dog that skill set as well. I don't think it was anything crazy looking at it. There were obviously dogs who turned wide. And I think in an era of course design where we have a lot of let's keep the dog in extension throughout the entirety of the course, I think those were spots where, regardless of handler speed, you could do a pretty decent job, whether you're helping them with body language, motion cues, whatever, position, verbal cues, that you can and should be able to turn your dog there. And it should have kind of jumped out at you as the handler. Hey, maybe I have the kind of dog that, I got to address this turn in some fashion, right? And right now, I think in agility, there's almost a loss of being able to do the in-between kind of turn, like what you might call a soft turn. Now, you're not doing a full wrap. Everyone can do a full wrap, and you're not doing the full extension. Everyone can do that too. And now somehow we've lost some of the degrees in between, which really defined a now gone era of agility. So I just like, a 90-degree turn every now and then. And if it's going to cost some dogs 2, 3, 4 tenths of a second because they can't make a good turn there, like, to me, that is a handling issue, right?
All right.
Well, I wanted to interrupt and ask, my one question that I've been sitting on is, I was not able to watch as much of the event as I wanted. I saw a little bit of the 20-inch and a little bit of the 16-inch around Jen's run with B. But in looking at the results, without having watched everything, so I freely acknowledge that I've not watched all the dogs run, I think just based on the results alone, the finals course was too easy. So I'm gonna put that out there. Jen, what do you think? Well, first, let me give you my empirical data. So I'm not even going to address preferred, just because there are fewer dogs there. But if we look at the regular height classes, 8 inches, we had 7 out of 11 clean, over 50%. And usually 8-inch, I'm okay with that being a little above 50%. And if you're asking me, well, what should the Q rate be for a big final in anything? I'm going to say anywhere between, I definitely don't want it over 50. 40s, I'm already like, that's a little too easy. I kind of mentally shoot for 30s. And what's too low? I think probably anything under, I would say maybe 15%, right? That might be too low. And so I'm going to err on the side of like, I would like to see, right. I would like to see some differences, because what I don't want to have happen is class after class where the dogs are separated by just tenths of a second, right? Where luck might be a factor, where measurement error of the laser eyes could decide a national champion, right? I don't want to see that. And so we're talking about 7-11 in 8-inch, 12-inch, you're looking at, what is that, 9 out of 12. What is that, 75%? That's ridiculous. And then 16-inch, 9 out of 15, right? What is that, 60%? So these are insane. And then you get to the 20-inch class, which was the biggest, 25 dogs, and there were 15 clean runs, right? These are all well over 50%. And then the last height, 24-inch, that's 6 out of 8, another 75% clean run rate. So I'm just looking at these stats, and y'all, I think it was too easy. So which one of you wants to provide the rebuttal?
I think you could say it was easier than past years, for sure, just based on the data from that. As far as being too easy, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. I did not walk it and think to myself, this course is too easy. The results, as you're reading them off, you're right, seem a bit higher than what I'd expect in the finals. Maybe it just means teams are getting better at being able to handle the mental management. I'm trying to think. The course itself, it basically called for 3 side changes, which I would have to look up what the rules of AKC Masters courses are. I will say that generally we look at the finals course as being a bit trickier than the average Masters course at trial, right? We did the podcast with Heather last year and talked about all the uniqueness that her course presented. I would say that this finals course very much matched what I would see as a master's course at a trial. So I guess maybe as a person who does a fair amount of AKC, that's why when I walked it, I didn't think, oh, this is too easy or, oh, this is too hard. I walked it, thought, oh, okay, this is an AKC master standard course without the table. We've got 3 side changes. The flow seems very reasonable. But if we want to go with the idea that a finals course should maybe be a little bit harder, then maybe we should be testing a little bit more handling. I didn't think the course tested as much handling. If we look at the actual faults that occurred, they were more skill. Coming off of, not to take away from AKC Wrap-Up, but coming off of the US Open, where we had almost the complete opposite effect, where nobody was going clean in the finals, and it seemed incredibly demotivating and demoralizing and not fun for anybody that was there, not fun for anybody that was watching, dogs and handlers that were leaving because they were so overfaced. That wasn't fun. So maybe it was like an attempt to counterbalance that and say, okay, well, nobody enjoyed when everybody made mistakes and there were so many faulted runs. And then it was taken over the other way. So if the idea that a finals course should be maybe a bit more elevated, a bit more unique, and a bit more challenging, then I would say this course was not hard enough. If we say that a finals course should match the AKC Masters standard rules, then I would say it did do that.
All right, I'm gonna provide a little bit of counterpoint, because I do agree that it was not super technical. It wasn't super technically difficult. But what I do think that this course did have is it had a lot of opportunities to reward handlers who were able to do it better than the other handlers. So I think that some of the tricky areas of this course, people stumbled through and they were still clean. But then the dogs that were really fluent in the skill had an advantage because they could get through that part faster. So I think that the part after the teeter, I think, was a spot where there were some people that kind of struggled through and made it, but their dogs had some questions about where they were going. And, there's some barking, some head checking and all of that. And then there were some people that just had this beautiful skill where, they just sailed through that part. They're going to be rewarded. And then I think that we didn't see a lot of faults coming out of the 11 tunnel. That's the first tunnel they take after the weaves. And it was the big, long tunnel, and all the handlers had to decide what they were going to do on the exit of the tunnel. And I feel like we did not see very many faults there, but I do think that handlers were probably spent a decent amount of their walkthrough like agonizing over exactly what they wanted to do there and how they were going to do it and what the fastest line was for their dog. And so I think the ability to choose the right thing for your dog and to execute like a nice tight path was tested there. So I think the tests were more about like, can you do it fluidly, quickly, and with good tight lines than they were, can you get through here without an off course? They were not off course traps. They were more like, fluid traps. And it did run really, really fast, which I thought was a lot of fun.
I was going to ask you, is the fact that it's televised, do you think that had an impact on the course design? I feel like it must have.
We talked to
and I'm not saying that again, so saying that the Q rate's a little high, maybe the courses are too easy. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
So I want to be clear there. And I'm not saying at all that it's a bad course. The course is actually quite good.
It's very, very
there were a couple of spots that I really, really liked, including the rear where so many dogs got pushed off the turn before the rear. And people didn't set it up properly.
So based on our discussion last year with Heather Dickinson, I would say that no, they do not exert a ton of influence for the televised final. I think that the judges, I'm sure that they're aware, but it did not sound like there was like a lot of restrictions being placed on them. I think that this one went for flow, and I think it definitely succeeded from that perspective. And then, okay, go ahead. Sorry, Esteban has a thought.
No, I kind of what prompted this was in looking at the results, especially in the 20-inch class, right? There was the Perry and Witt who won it, right?
Yep.
But 9 1,000ths, not 100s, right? In most trials, it goes out 2 digits past the decimal, right? So you run a dog and you're 29.53, two digits there, 5.3. And that's to the hundreds. But at nationals, they go to the thousands, right? And that's what was needed to separate the winners here. 9 1,000ths, right? That's less than 100th of a second separating these two dogs. And those are the situations I think you can avoid with course design. I think maybe one thing that you could do to do it is put a very ambiguous, not easy to figure out choice of which way to maybe turn a dog, or a bidirectional obstacle or something like that. And if you always make sure something like that is in there, you're going to get a
more
much more variation in handling.
I'm glad you brought that up, because it reminds me of something that we didn't talk about in the course design. We'll just talk about it right here in the middle. Is because Jen and I were talking with Abby as well, and we were surprised that there were no choices in the courses in any of the rounds, because we did this NAC prep and we looked at the judges.
We were getting ready for this.
There was just
getting everyone ready for it.
Choice. All five judges.
All these wraps. Lots of wraps.
All 5 judges had wrap choices in their courses in the past year or two. Multiple ones that we were like, you are going to have a wrap choice at some point in nationals. You need to know which way is fastest for your dog. We're timing people on which way is faster. And there wasn't a single wrap choice in any of the rounds. So I thought that was amusing. But anyway, back to finals. I think that is an approach. I didn't mind. Like, it's not like all of the runs were super tight. I thought for that one particular one, as a spectator, it added a lot of excitement. Like, we were literally in the stands surrounded by agility people, right? And when Soda Pop ran, they got second. Whit had already put down her time. And everybody was like, we don't bother remembering numbers to the thousands, right? Everybody in the stands was like, oh, it was, 29.5. And then Soda Pop was also 29.5. And we're like, what was it? 0.5 what? And everybody's like, and nobody quite knew how much to cheer. Nobody knew if she had won or not. And we were all like, I looked it up on my phone, but of course the Wi-Fi is horrible and everything. And we just kind of had to wait. And there was kind of like, everybody gave like a medium applause, more applause than you would for, just any run, but maybe a little bit less than you would for a champion. It was kind of like, yeah. Like we didn't know, what to do. So I thought it kind of was exciting. I thought it was exciting that it was that close. And I think I love the fact that we have, like, to me, it's justification for the fact that we have electronic eyes doing the timing is justification for the fact that we don't have a table at nationals. And now we won't have one at regular trials either, right? We're getting rid of all of these subjective elements that can affect the time and letting the fastest time win. And if the fastest time is only 9/1000ths of a second, it is still the fastest time, and that's your winner.
Okay, I think I'm going to think about that a little bit. I think you might have talked me into moderating my position.
All right. So
it was a good course.
It was a good course.
To be clear, I like the course design.
Yeah. So now, as we get towards the end of this podcast, we will talk through the winners of the National Agility Championship, and we will start with the preferred class. The 4-inch preferred winner was a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel named Zoom, run by Antonio Rotel. And this was one of your challenge round into finals, into the champion title winners. So Zoom came in through the challenge round and then ended up winning the entire event.
It was also a repeat win for her.
All right. So we have
a second year in a row. Yep, for Zoom.
All right. Fantastic. We're seeing more and more of those. I think we just have a lot of amazing talent in the agility community here in 2024. In the 8-inch preferred class, Tinkerbell, an English Cocker Spaniel run by Tim Paneri, won that class. In the 16-inch preferred was Monkey Joe, an All-American run by Najee Burkos. In the 16-inch preferred class, Gambit, a Border Collie, run by Adriana Notstad. And then in the 20-inch preferred class, Gator, a Labrador Retriever, run by Rachel Evers. So congratulations to all the preferred National Agility champions. Then in the regular class, in the 8-inch, we have Chelsea, a Pembroke Welsh Corgi, run by Janelle Julian. Sunday, the All-American, run by Angie Benequisto. Zula, the challenge round winner and Bad Dog Agility sponsored athlete, and junior handler, a Border Collie run by Jada Sawney. And then, as we said before, Wit, run by Perry DeWitt. Wit is a Border Collie, won by 9/1000ths of a second for a repeat win. So they were the defending champion. And in the 24-inch class, Sterling, a Weimaraner run by Lori Barbie. And I just had to point out for the 24-inch class, I love this class because of the variety of the dogs that are in it. And there was only one dog breed that was a repeat in the class. And it was not Border Collie. We used to say back in the day that Border Collies dominated 16, 20, and 24. But it was not the Border Collie that was a repeat breed. It was a Weimaraner. There were 2 Weimaraners, and then everything else was a different breed. So I thought that was like a really cool little thing. We had a Vizsla Weimaraner, Golden Retriever, Poodle, one more Weimaraner, Border Collie, Belgian Sheepdog, and a Whippet. So that was the 24-inch class.
We also had a pretty even mix of females and male dogs. It wasn't 50-50, but when I looked at the regular round winners, if 4 of the 5 of them are female dogs, Whit being the only boy. But then when we add in the preferred dogs, it's a pretty even mix. So, people always ask that all the time. Is it better to have a male or a female? And this year, we're proving out a lot of breed variety and some variety on male female as well, which I love to see all the variety on stuff. And also some men in there. I think that was a conversation I read on Facebook as well. More men in the finals, more men winning, which is always good to see as well.
Yeah, that's true. We used to think of this as, we used to ask, like, why are there not more men in agility? And I feel like it is trending up. So that is good for the sport. So congratulations to all of the preferred National Agility champions, all the new National Agility champions. And that will do it for this week's podcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors, St. Rocco's Treats and hititboard.com. Check out the Teeter Teach It, only at hititboard.com. The Teeter Teach It is an easy-to-use tool that controls the amount of tip on your teeter so you can introduce motion to your dog in a gradual way. Go to hititboard.com for the new Teeter Teach It and other training tools and toys. Use discount code BDA10 to get 10% off your order. That's hititboard.com. Happy training.
Thank you for listening to Bad Dog Agility. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information, updates, and links to all our socials, just check out our website, www.baddogagility.com. If you haven't already signed up for our email subscription, we would love to have you join the BDA community. Until next time, take care.
Geology rocks, but geography is where it's at.